Yo, blue hair, where's the salon at?
Petty Officer Carlos Rodriguez's crude laughter boomed across the Naval Amphibious Base Coronado Mess Hall, his voice slicing through 50 conversations like a knife through silk. The sound echoed off concrete walls decorated with decades of military achievements, framed photos of SEAL operations, and motivational posters that had witnessed countless meals shared by America's finest warriors. At table 14, near the serving line for scrambled eggs and regulation coffee, Alexandra Morgan sat alone with her neon blue-green hair cascading past her shoulders like liquid electricity. The 28-year-old woman didn't look up from her bowl of oatmeal, her spoon moving with mechanical precision between bowl and mouth. Her porcelain skin caught the fluorescent lighting, creating an almost ethereal glow that made her stand out like a tropical fish in a pond of military-issue camouflage. Rodriguez strutted forward with the confidence of someone who'd never lost a fight, his 6'2" frame carved from years of punishing SEAL training. Behind him, Petty Officer Second Class Marcus Miller and Petty Officer First Class Daniel Brooks formed a triangle of intimidation, their matching desert combat uniforms pressed to perfection, their tactical boots clicking against linoleum with parade ground precision. "I'm talking to you, Instagram princess," Rodriguez continued, stopping close enough that his shadow fell across Lexi's table. His brown eyes swept over her fitted black t-shirt and dark jeans with obvious calculation. "This is a restricted military facility, not Comic-Con. You got clearance to be here, sweetheart?" Lexi set down her spoon without a sound. The way her blue-green eyes cataloged the mess hall's layout, counting exits, noting potential weapons, measuring distances to cover, resembled a predator more than prey. Her scan included the serving line where kitchen staff pretended to work while obviously listening, the corner table where Master Chief Patterson read his newspaper with increasing irritation, and the scattered groups of Marines, SEALs, and support personnel who were beginning to notice the developing confrontation. What Rodriguez would discover in the next 18 minutes would transform his perfect military record into a cautionary tale whispered throughout special operations communities worldwide. But for now, surrounded by his teammates in the heart of SEAL country, he owned this moment completely. "Cat got your tongue," Rodriguez pressed, leaning closer until his cologne mixed unpleasantly with the institutional smell of industrial cleaning products and mass-produced breakfast. "Maybe you're finally realizing what happens when civilians wander into our world without permission." The tactical positioning Lexi maintained even while seated, weight distributed evenly, shoulders square, feet planted for rapid movement, went unnoticed by everyone except Master Chief Patterson. The 30-year veteran's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips, as something about her stillness triggered memories of briefings, where photographs carried classification stamps reading, "Eyes only," and "Burn after reading." From the kitchen area, Seaman Davis watched through the serving window, his teenage face creased with obvious discomfort. Fresh out of basic training, and still intimidated by SEALs who seemed larger than life, Davis nonetheless recognized bullying when he saw it. His grip tightened on the spatula he'd been using to flip hash browns, metal warming under sweaty palms. Rodriguez's performance was drawing exactly the audience he wanted. Conversations throughout the mess hall had died to whispers as personnel craned their necks for better views. Several phones appeared, recording what promised to become the morning's entertainment. In an age where military confrontations went viral within hours, Rodriguez was playing to cameras he couldn't see, building a reputation that extended far beyond base boundaries. "You know what really gets me?" Rodriguez announced, his voice carrying enough to reach every corner of the rectangular dining area. "It's not just trespassing. It's the disrespect, walking into a place where real warriors eat, where blood has been spilled for freedom, looking like you're heading to some rave. You know what really gets me about moments like this? Here's someone being completely judged by her appearance, and I can already feel that familiar burn of injustice. I'm curious, where are you watching this story unfold from today? Are you tuning in from the US, maybe somewhere in Europe, or perhaps from across the globe? There's something universal about witnessing unfairness that connects us all, no matter where we are. Drop your location in the comments, because I love seeing how these stories of hidden strength reach people everywhere." Miller stepped closer, his blonde crew cut gleaming under fluorescent lights. "Carlos is right. This ain't Coachella, princess. Real soldiers died so you could play dress up with your weird hair and attitude." The comment drew approving nods from nearby tables, where younger personnel sat. Fresh from training pipelines that emphasized unit cohesion and military tradition, they saw Lexi's appearance as an affront to everything they'd sacrificed to earn. Her silence only confirmed their assumptions about civilian entitlement and military disrespect. But Brooks, the quietest of Rodriguez's trio, noticed something troubling. When Miller moved to block her view of the main entrance, Lexi's head turned to maintain visual contact with the doorway. Not a nervous glance, but deliberate surveillance. The kind of situational awareness they drilled into operators during survival training, where losing track of exits meant capture or death. "Question for you, Blue Hair," Brooks said, his Georgia accent thick with skepticism. "You know what MRE stands for?" "Meal, ready to eat," Lexi responded immediately, her voice carrying a slight Midwestern accent that softened sharp consonants into something almost musical. The answer came too quickly, too automatically, like muscle memory rather than Google searches. Miller laughed harshly. "Lucky guess. Everyone knows that from movies." But Master Chief Patterson's newspaper rustled as his attention focused completely on the developing scene. 30 years of military service had taught him to recognize training when he saw it. The way Lexi held her shoulders, perfectly square and stable. The controlled breathing that maintained calm under pressure. The automatic napkin folding she'd done earlier, executed with crisp military corners that would pass inspection on any parade ground. Female Marine Corporal Sofia Garcia emerged from the coffee station, her own confrontational energy adding fuel to the growing fire. With 6 years of service and a recent deployment to Afghanistan, Garcia carried herself with the aggressive confidence of someone who'd proven herself in male-dominated environments through pure determination and superior performance. "I don't care who your daddy is or what strings got pulled," Garcia announced, stopping within arm's reach of Lexi's table. Her voice carried the particular edge reserved for situations where someone's mere presence felt like personal insult. Military facilities aren't tourist attractions for Instagram influencers looking for authentic backdrops. The forming crowd now included representatives from every branch present on base. Navy SEALs, Marine Force Recon, Army Special Forces personnel on joint training rotations, and support staff from intelligence communities. Each group brought their own perspective to the unfolding drama, but all shared common ground in their obvious disapproval of civilian intrusion into sacred military space. Lexi's response was to maintain perfect posture despite increasing pressure. Her spine remained straight, her breathing controlled, her hands resting on the table in positions that allowed rapid movement if necessary. The tactical positioning was unconscious, automatic, professional. Lieutenant Jennifer Kim entered through the main doors, her intelligence officer insignia catching overhead lighting as she surveyed the gathered crowd with obvious disapproval. With 12 years of service, including multiple deployments to classified locations, Kim had developed sharp instincts for reading situations that might compromise operational security. "What's the commotion?" Kim asked Master Chief Patterson, her voice carrying sufficient authority to cut through surrounding conversations. "SEALs found themselves a trespasser," Patterson replied, his tone carefully neutral. "Claims she has authorization to be here, but Rodriguez thinks she's running some kind of social media scam." Kim's dark eyes studied Lexi with professional interest. Something about the woman's composure under pressure struck her as unusual. Most civilians confronted by multiple military personnel showed obvious signs of stress. Elevated breathing, defensive postures, nervous gestures. But this woman sat like someone accustomed to hostile interrogation, someone trained to resist pressure and maintain operational security under extreme duress. Rodriguez was building toward his crescendo now, feeding off crowd energy like a performer hitting his stride. "You want to know what really pisses me off? It's the stolen valor aspect. Walking around acting like military service is some kind of costume party, some kind of game you can play when regular life gets boring." The accusation drew angry murmurs from the assembled personnel. Stolen valor struck at the heart of military identity, trivializing sacrifices made by generations of warriors who'd earned their status through blood, sweat, and loss that civilians couldn't comprehend. But Lexi's reaction wasn't defensive outrage or stammered denials. Instead, she glanced at her watch, a ruggedized timepiece designed for tactical operations, and seemed to calculate something internally. Whatever conclusion she reached appeared to satisfy her, because she finally spoke. "Petty Officer Rodriguez," she said, her voice calm and clear despite the hostile audience surrounding her. "What makes you think I'm not military?" The question landed like a grenade in the middle of careful assumptions. Rodriguez had been prepared for denials, excuses, maybe tears. He hadn't expected direct confrontation delivered with the kind of confidence usually reserved for superior officers addressing subordinates. Besides the obvious, Rodriguez gestured dismissively at her appearance. Hair color that violates every regulation in existence, clothes that scream civilian, and an attitude that says you've never spent a day taking orders from anyone. "Military personnel can be off-duty," Lexi observed mildly. "Hair regulations apply to active duty status, not personal time. And my clothes are within regulation for authorized civilian attire on base." Brooks stepped forward, his tactical training kicking in as he sensed the conversation shifting in unexpected directions. "Prove it. If you're military, what's your MOS?" "That's classified," Lexi replied without hesitation. The response sent ripples through the crowd. Legitimate military personnel didn't claim classification unless their roles genuinely warranted it. Intelligence officers, special operations personnel, and select support staff in sensitive positions use that phrase when discussing assignments that carried security implications beyond normal military service. Master Chief Patterson folded his newspaper and stood, his weathered face showing new interest in the developing situation. In 3 decades of service, he'd encountered enough classified personnel to recognize certain markers. The way Lexi had automatically positioned herself for optimal sightlines, her calm response to aggressive questioning, the unconscious tactical awareness that suggested training at levels far beyond basic military service. Garcia wasn't backing down, her Marine pride refusing to accept deflection as sufficient answer. "Classified, my ass. If you were really military, you'd have ID, deployment patches, something to prove you belong here, instead of hiding behind mysterious claims and weird hair." "I have authorization," Lexi said simply. "From who?" Rodriguez demanded. "Above your clearance level." The answer was delivered with such matter-of-fact certainty that even Rodriguez hesitated. In military hierarchies, claiming superior authorization was either legitimate truth or the kind of lie that resulted in serious consequences. The confidence in Lexi's voice suggested she understood exactly which category applied to her situation. Lieutenant Kim moved closer, her intelligence background providing context that pure combat personnel might miss. Personnel with classification levels above standard military service existed in shadowy areas where normal rules bent around operational necessities. Special Activities Division, task force assignments, and other government entities that operated with different authorities and protocols. "What organization?" Kim asked, her tone professional but insistent. "Need-to-know basis," Lexi replied, meeting Kim's gaze directly. "And unless this facility is experiencing a security breach requiring immediate response, you don't need to know." The exchange had shifted dramatically from bullying incident to potential counterintelligence situation. Kim's training kicked in as she processed implications of Lexi's responses. Legitimate classified personnel carried identification and could provide verification through proper channels, but they also operated under restrictions about revealing their presence to unauthorized individuals, even other military personnel. From the kitchen, Seaman Davis watched with growing unease. The confrontation had evolved beyond simple harassment into something that felt dangerous, like watching an avalanche build momentum before the slide. His instincts told him this woman wasn't what she appeared to be, and the SEALs might be making a mistake that would have consequences extending far beyond hurt feelings. The ruggedized communication device tucked discreetly in Lexi's jacket pocket featured military-grade encryption and satellite connectivity designed for personnel operating in high-risk environments where standard consumer electronics would fail completely under operational stress. Rodriguez's perfect confidence was showing hairline cracks as the conversation moved into territories where his SEAL training provided no preparation. Confronting terrorists and enemy combatants followed established protocols, but challenging someone who might represent higher authority meant stepping into political minefields that could end careers. "You know what?" Rodriguez said, his voice carrying forced bravado. "I think you're full of shit. I think you're some wannabe who watched too many spy movies and thinks mysterious answers make you seem important. Real operators don't need to hide behind classification claims." Miller nodded agreement, encouraged by his teammates' commitment to the confrontation. Real warriors have nothing to hide from other warriors. Classification doesn't apply between military personnel sharing the same facility. But Master Chief Patterson was studying Lexi with increasing concern. Her responses demonstrated familiarity with classification protocols that extended beyond basic military service. The specific language she used, the calm delivery under pressure, the automatic tactical positioning, these suggested training at levels that made SEAL certification look like basic training. Garcia decided to escalate, her Marine aggressiveness refusing to accept stalemate. Prove it right now, or I'm calling MPs to have you removed for trespassing and stolen valor. Put up or shut up, princess. Lexi glanced around the crowded mess hall, seeming to count personnel and calculate something internally. Whatever decision she reached appeared to involve accepting Garcia's challenge, because she stood slowly and deliberately, her movements controlled and precise. Standing, Lexi revealed a compact, athletic build that had been concealed by her seated position. Her shoulders were broader than her appearance suggested, her arms showing muscle definition that spoke of serious physical training. But more than her physique, her bearing had changed. The submissive civilian had been replaced by someone who moved with predatory confidence. Corporal Garcia, Lexi said, her voice carrying new authority that made several nearby personnel automatically straighten to attention. What's the current threat assessment protocol for this facility? Garcia blinked, caught off guard by the shift from defensive to offensive questioning. That's not public information. No, it's not, Lexi agreed. So, why would a civilian know to ask about it? The logical trap closed around Garcia like steel jaws. If Lexi was truly civilian, she wouldn't know military facilities maintain threat assessments. But if she knew enough to ask the question, she clearly possessed military knowledge that contradicted her supposed civilian status. Brooks tried to maintain momentum, his Georgia accent thickening with stress. Anyone can learn military terms from movies and internet research. Doesn't prove anything except you've done your homework. Wikipedia University, Miller added, with forced laughter that fell flat in the suddenly tense atmosphere. But Lieutenant Kim was connecting dots that painted a troubling picture. Lexi's knowledge extended beyond general military information into specific protocols used by facilities handling classified materials and personnel. The kind of detailed familiarity that suggested either extensive training or active involvement in operations requiring such knowledge. Let me ask you something, Rodriguez, Lexi said, turning to face the SEAL directly. What's the current op-tempo for SEAL Team 6 operations in the Middle East theater? Rodriguez's face went pale. Operational tempo for classified SEAL teams wasn't discussed openly, especially not in mixed company where support personnel and other branch representatives might be listening. The question demonstrated knowledge that should be restricted to personnel with specific need-to-know authorization. I can't discuss that, Rodriguez stammered. Why not? Lexi pressed. If I'm just some civilian with blue hair, what difference does it make what you tell me? The logical contradiction was devastating. Rodriguez had spent 20 minutes establishing that Lexi was civilian, but now found himself unable to answer her questions because doing so would violate security protocols designed to protect information from civilians. Master Chief Patterson approached the group, his 3 decades of experience providing perspective that younger personnel lacked. Ma'am, he said formally, addressing Lexi with the respect reserved for senior personnel, perhaps we should continue this conversation in a more appropriate setting. The suggestion acknowledged what Patterson's instincts had been telling him. This woman represented something that required careful handling rather than public confrontation. His change in demeanor sent signals throughout the mess hall that the situation had shifted beyond simple civilian trespassing. I can practically feel the tension building through the screen right now. Something tells me you're picking up on the same subtle clues I am. What do you think about Lexi's reaction so far? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm genuinely curious what details are standing out to you. Kim stepped forward, her intelligence background providing framework for managing potentially sensitive situations. Master Chief is right. If there are classification issues involved, this needs to move to secure facilities with proper protocol. But Garcia's Marine stubbornness refused to accept deflection. I don't care about protocols. I want to know who this woman thinks she is, walking into our mess hall, acting like she belongs here, throwing around military terms like she earned them. What if she did earn them? Davis called out from the kitchen serving window, his young voice cutting through the tension. All eyes turned toward the fresh-faced seaman, who immediately regretted drawing attention to himself but pressed forward anyway. What if we're wrong about her? Rodriguez rounded on Davis with the fury of someone whose authority had been questioned by an subordinate. Wrong about what, Seaman? Wrong about obvious civilian trespassing? Wrong about stolen valor? Wrong about someone disrespecting everything we've sacrificed for? Wrong about who she is, Davis replied quietly, his voice barely audible over the murmur of surrounding conversations. The simple statement hung in the air like a challenge. For 25 minutes, everyone had operated under assumptions about Lexi's identity based entirely on her appearance. Blue hair, civilian clothes, and submissive demeanor had created a narrative that justified their treatment of her. But Davis was suggesting the narrative might be completely false. Brooks decided to escalate the confrontation, his patience exhausted by questions that had no satisfactory answers. Enough games. If you're really military, prove it. Show us some identification, some authorization, something concrete instead of mysterious claims and deflection. Lexi reached into her jacket pocket, her movement deliberate and controlled. What she withdrew wasn't standard military identification, but a black leather credential case that several personnel recognized from classified briefings and joint operations with federal agencies. She opened the case and displayed it briefly to Kim and Patterson, her movements quick enough to provide verification, but too fast for phones to capture clear images. Both officers studied the contents for several seconds, their expressions shifting from skepticism to concern to something approaching alarm. Kim stepped backward, her face pale. "Jesus Christ," she whispered, forgetting military bearing in the shock of recognition. Patterson's reaction was more controlled, but equally significant. He came to full attention, his weathered face showing the kind of respect reserved for personnel whose authority transcended normal military hierarchy. "Stand down," Patterson ordered sharply, his voice carrying enough command authority to freeze every person in the mess hall. "All of you, stand down right now." But Garcia's Marine training made her suspicious of sudden reversals that didn't include proper explanation. "Stand down from what, Master Chief? What was in that case?" Kim and Patterson exchanged glances that spoke to shared understanding of classification levels that exceeded anything present in the room. Whatever they had seen in Lexi's credentials required handling protocols that went beyond normal base security. "From what you're doing right now," Patterson replied grimly. "All of you need to step away and let proper authorities handle this situation." Rodriguez's perfect confidence was cracking under the weight of implications he didn't fully understand, but instinctively recognized as dangerous. "Handle what situation? She's civilian trespasser with fake credentials. How hard is this to figure out?" "Because those aren't fake credentials," Kim said quietly, her intelligence background providing context that combat personnel lacked. "Those are federal identification for personnel operating under authorities that supersede normal military jurisdiction." The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled crowd. Federal personnel with superseding authority existed in shadowy areas where normal rules bent around operational necessities. CIA, DIA, Special Activities Division, and other agencies that operated with different protocols and restrictions. Miller's bravado collapsed entirely as he processed implications of challenging federal authority. Federal? Like FBI federal or CIA federal? Like the kind of federal that can make your military career disappear without explanation, Patterson replied harshly. The kind that operates under classification levels you don't have clearance to know about. Lexi closed her credential case and returned it to her jacket, her movements maintaining the controlled precision that had characterized all her actions. But now that precision appeared in proper context, not nervous civilian behavior, but professional training that exceeded anything present in the room. Garcia's Marine pride struggled against growing evidence that she had made a serious mistake. "I don't care what agency she works for. She still doesn't belong in our mess hall without proper authorization and escort." "What makes you think she doesn't have authorization?" Kim asked pointedly. The question highlighted assumptions that had driven the entire confrontation. Everyone had operated under the belief that Lexi's presence was unauthorized based purely on her appearance. But federal personnel conducting operations on military bases would have authorization through channels that didn't require disclosure to base personnel. Rodriguez was struggling to maintain his position in the face of mounting evidence that he had seriously misjudged the situation. Authorization from who? Nobody told us about federal personnel being on base. "Did anyone think to ask base command before starting this public confrontation?" Patterson asked rhetorically. "Did anyone consider that maybe, just maybe, there might be authorized activities that don't require your knowledge or approval?" The questions were devastating because they highlighted the fundamental arrogance underlying the SEALs' behavior. They had assumed their status as elite warriors gave them authority over everyone present on base, without considering that other organizations might have different authorities and protocols. Brooks made one last attempt to salvage some dignity from the collapsing situation. Even if she's federal, she should have proper identification displayed and follow base protocols for visitor access. "What protocols?" Lexi asked mildly, speaking for the first time since revealing her credentials. "The ones that require disclosure of classified operations to unauthorized personnel? The ones that compromise operational security by advertising federal presence to potential adversaries?" Her questions demonstrated intimate familiarity with the complex intersections between military and federal authorities. The knowledge extended far beyond civilian understanding into operational areas that suggested extensive training and active involvement in classified activities. Kim was mentally reviewing security protocols for handling discovered federal operations, her intelligence background providing framework for managing situations that could have serious consequences if mishandled. "We need to contact Base Command immediately and report this situation." "Why?" Garcia asked suspiciously. "What aren't you telling us?" Kim and Patterson exchanged another glance, loaded with shared understanding of classification levels that exceeded their authority to discuss. Whatever they had seen in Lexi's credentials carried implications that required careful handling through proper channels. "Because interfering with federal operations is a federal crime," Kim said flatly. "Because challenging federal authority without proper justification can end military careers and result in prosecution. And because continuing this confrontation could compromise national security operations that none of us have clearance to know about." Specialized insurance coverage for high-risk operational personnel provided comprehensive protection, including advanced medical coordination and equipment replacement services that standard civilian policies couldn't address for professionals working in classified environments. The education hit the assembled personnel like cold water, washing away the comfortable assumptions that had justified their behavior. What had started as righteous confrontation with civilian trespasser had transformed into potential federal crime with career-ending consequences. Rodriguez's perfect features showed the first cracks of genuine fear as he processed implications of his actions. 20 minutes of public humiliation directed at federal personnel conducting authorized operations could result in charges that would destroy not just his military career, but his entire future. "This is insane," he said, his voice lacking its earlier confidence. "How were we supposed to know? She looks like some wannabe with weird hair, not federal agent. Where are the suits, the badges, the obvious signs that tell us to back off?" "Because real federal operations don't advertise their presence," Patterson said harshly. "Because professionals conducting classified activities dress to blend in, not stand out. And because assuming someone's identity based on their appearance is exactly the kind of mistake that gets people killed in the real world." The lesson was brutal but necessary. In military environments where split-second decisions carried life-or-death consequences, assumptions based on appearance rather than facts could have devastating results. Rodriguez had learned this principle in combat training, but failed to apply it when comfortable assumption zones supported his desired narrative. Miller was calculating damage control options, his mind racing through possible explanations that might minimize consequences. "If we apologize now, explain that we were just following security protocols, maybe this whole thing can be forgotten." "Forgotten by who?" Kim asked pointedly. "By the federal agency whose operation you just compromised? By the base command that's going to have to explain why their personnel interfered with classified activities? By the military justice system that takes interference with federal operations very seriously?" Each question drove home the magnitude of their mistake. What had seemed like harmless harassment of civilian trespasser had become interference with federal operations, compromise of classified activities, and potential obstruction of national security missions. Garcia's Marine training was struggling to process the reversal of everything she thought she understood about the situation. "I still don't get it. Why would federal agent be sitting alone in our mess hall eating oatmeal? What kind of operation requires eating breakfast with SEALs?" "The kind you don't have clearance to know about," Lexi replied calmly. "The kind that requires blending into normal base operations without drawing attention through obvious federal presence." Her explanation made perfect sense within the context of counterintelligence operations, internal security assessments, and other federal activities that required covert observation of military personnel. The very effectiveness of such operations depended on federal personnel appearing to be normal base occupants rather than obvious outsiders. Brooks was beginning to understand the scope of their mistake, his tactical mind processing implications that extended far beyond immediate consequences. Are you saying you've been watching us? That this whole breakfast thing was some kind of surveillance operation? I'm saying your actions over the past 30 minutes have demonstrated exactly why federal oversight of military operations is sometimes necessary, Lexi replied pointedly. The criticism was devastating because it implied that Rodriguez and his team had failed basic professionalism tests while under federal observation. Their behavior would be documented, analyzed, and potentially reported to higher authorities as examples of military personnel who couldn't be trusted with sensitive operations. Master Chief Patterson was reviewing potential damage control measures, his 3 decades of experience providing perspective on situations that could escalate beyond local handling. We need to secure this area and limit further exposure until proper authorities can assess the situation. Kim nodded agreement, her intelligence background reinforcing Patterson's instincts. And we need to ensure that nothing discussed here gets repeated without proper authorization. Federal operations are protected by classification levels that make discussing them a federal offense. The warning sent additional shockwaves through the assembled personnel. Not only had they interfered with federal operations, but continuing to discuss the situation could result in additional charges related to unauthorized disclosure of classified information. Rodriguez was mentally reviewing his actions, looking for something that might mitigate the disaster his morning had become. Look, this is clearly a misunderstanding. We thought she was civilian trespasser. Anyone would have made the same mistake given her appearance and lack of obvious identification. Would they? Lexi asked mildly. Would professional military personnel automatically assume someone's unauthorized presence based purely on appearance? Would they conduct public confrontations without verifying facts through proper channels? Would they prioritize assumptions over evidence when national security might be involved? Each question highlighted failures of judgment that went beyond simple mistakes into fundamental professional inadequacy. Rodriguez had revealed himself to be exactly the kind of military personnel who couldn't be trusted with sensitive operations, requiring discretion and good judgment. Davis watched from the kitchen serving window, his young face showing a mixture of vindication and concern. His instincts about the situation had been correct, but being right provided little satisfaction when the consequences might destroy the careers of personnel he respected, despite their obvious mistakes. What happens now? Garcia asked quietly, her Marine pride struggling with the reality of having been completely wrong about everything she thought she understood. Kim and Patterson exchanged glances loaded with shared understanding of procedures that would now unfold according to federal protocols rather than normal military discipline. Now we follow proper channels and let federal authorities decide how to handle interference with their operations. The response offered no comfort because federal authorities operated under different rules than military justice systems. Military personnel could face federal prosecution, security clearance revocation, and career termination for interfering with classified operations, regardless of whether their actions resulted from misunderstanding rather than malicious intent. Your instincts are probably screaming that something massive is about to drop. The way she's handling this situation, there's definitely more going on here. What's your gut telling you about what's coming next? Let me know in the comments below. Lexi glanced at her tactical watch again, seeming to calculate timing for something beyond the immediate confrontation. Whatever schedule she was following appeared to be proceeding according to plan, despite the unexpected delay caused by Rodriguez's intervention. "Gentlemen, ladies," she said formally, her voice carrying new authority that made several personnel automatically assume more respectful postures. "I appreciate your concern for base security. However, my presence here is authorized through proper channels, and my activities are protected by classification levels that preclude further discussion." The dismissal was professional but final, indicating that explanations would not be forthcoming, regardless of curiosity or demands for additional information. Federal personnel operating under classification had no obligation to justify their presence to military personnel lacking proper authorization. Rodriguez made one desperate attempt to salvage something from the disaster. If you're really federal, you could have just said so from the beginning. This whole confrontation could have been avoided with simple explanation. Could it? Lexi replied pointedly. Would simple explanation have satisfied your assumptions about my appearance and presence? Would professional identification have prevented public confrontation designed to humiliate someone you had already decided didn't belong here? The questions were rhetorical but devastating, highlighting the fundamental arrogance that had driven Rodriguez's behavior. His actions had been motivated by assumptions about civilian inferiority rather than legitimate security concerns, making explanation irrelevant to his underlying motivations. Patterson was beginning to understand that the situation extended far beyond simple misidentification into potentially career-ending demonstration of professional inadequacy under federal observation. "Ma'am, is there anything we can do to mitigate the damage from this misunderstanding?" "That depends," Lexi replied calmly, "on whether your personnel can demonstrate the discretion and professionalism required for handling sensitive situations going forward." The conditional offer suggested that federal assessment of base personnel was ongoing, with Rodriguez's team serving as test cases for evaluating military readiness for operations requiring federal coordination. Their performance would influence decisions about future assignments and security clearances. Kim understood the implications immediately, her intelligence background providing context for federal evaluation processes that could make or break military careers. "Understood, ma'am. We'll ensure this incident is handled through proper channels with appropriate discretion." Miller was struggling to process the complete reversal of everything he thought he understood about power dynamics and authority on military bases. This is crazy. How is some woman with blue hair suddenly in charge of our careers? Because that woman with blue hair represents federal authority that supersedes your military rank, Patterson said harshly. Because professional competence matters more than appearance when national security is involved. And because your actions over the past 30 minutes have demonstrated exactly why federal oversight exists. The lesson was brutal, but necessary. Military personnel who couldn't adapt to complex authority structures and classification protocols were liabilities in operations, requiring coordination between multiple agencies and jurisdictions. Brooks was calculating potential consequences, his tactical mind processing implications that extended far beyond immediate punishment. Will this go in our service records? Will it affect our security clearances? Will it impact future assignments? That depends on federal evaluation of your actions and your demonstrated ability to handle sensitive situations professionally going forward, Kim replied diplomatically. The non-answer was actually more alarming than direct threat, because it indicated that consequences would be determined by federal personnel operating under different standards than military justice. Rodriguez's fate was no longer in military hands, but subject to federal assessment processes that could be far more severe than court-martial. Garcia's Marine training was struggling to accept submission to authority she couldn't see or understand, but her survival instincts recognized the futility of continued resistance. "What do you want from us? How do we fix this mess?" "By demonstrating the professionalism and discretion that should have been your first response to an unfamiliar situation," Lexi replied calmly. "By following proper protocols instead of making assumptions based on appearance, and by remembering that in military environments, things are not always what they seem." The guidance was reasonable, but highlighted fundamental failures that went beyond simple mistakes into professional inadequacy. Rodriguez and his team had revealed themselves to be exactly the kind of military personnel who couldn't be trusted with sensitive operations, requiring good judgment and discretion. Patterson was reviewing damage control procedures, his experience providing framework for managing situations that had escalated beyond local authority. "Ma'am, what are the proper channels for reporting this incident and ensuring appropriate follow-up?" "Your base command will be contacted by appropriate federal authorities," Lexi replied formally. "Further discussions will proceed according to established protocols for handling interference with classified operations." The response indicated that federal wheels were already in motion, with consequences proceeding according to predetermined procedures rather than negotiated settlements. Rodriguez's fate would be determined by federal evaluation rather than military discipline. Davis emerged from the kitchen, his young face showing concern for personnel he respected, despite their obvious mistakes. "Ma'am, they're good soldiers. They made a mistake, but they're good soldiers who serve their country with honor." Lexi studied Davis with new interest, her expression showing the first hint of something other than professional detachment. What makes you think honor matters less than judgment in military service, Seaman Davis? The question challenged Davis to articulate why good intentions should mitigate professional failures that could compromise national security operations. His answer would reveal whether he understood the stakes involved in military service beyond emotional loyalty to teammates. Because everyone makes mistakes, Davis replied quietly. Because learning from mistakes is how people become better soldiers. And because destroying careers over misunderstandings doesn't make anyone safer. The response showed wisdom beyond Davis's years and military experience, recognizing that professional development required balance between accountability and opportunity for growth. His perspective offered hope that some base personnel possessed judgment that exceeded their formal training. Lexi nodded approvingly, her expression softening slightly. That's true, Seaman Davis. The question is whether these personnel can demonstrate sufficient growth to justify continued trust in sensitive operations. The conditional assessment offered hope while maintaining standards that protected national security operations from personnel who couldn't adapt to complex situations requiring discretion and good judgment. Rodriguez seized the opening desperately, his perfect confidence replaced by genuine humility. Ma'am, we can learn from this. We can do better. This mistake doesn't define who we are as soldiers or how we serve our country. Doesn't it? Lexi replied pointedly. When someone's appearance triggers assumptions that override professional protocols, when ego matters more than facts, when public humiliation becomes more important than discretion, what does that say about fundamental character? The question struck at the heart of Rodriguez's motivations, highlighting personal failings that extended beyond simple professional mistakes into character issues that could compromise any operation requiring integrity and good judgment. Advanced legal training programs and international security law prepared personnel for complex compliance challenges during sensitive operations, where standard education would be insufficient for the sophisticated requirements of modern classified missions. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of base command personnel who had been summoned by Kim's urgent call. Colonel Sarah Mitchell entered the mess hall with her aide, Commander James Walsh, their expressions showing the controlled alarm of senior officers responding to potential security breach. Mitchell surveyed the scene with experienced eyes, taking in the crowd of personnel, the obvious tension, and the woman with blue hair who seemed remarkably calm despite being the center of federal incident requiring command intervention. Master Chief Patterson, Mitchell said formally, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. Report. Patterson came to attention, his weathered face showing the stress of managing situation that had escalated far beyond his authority to resolve. Ma'am, we have federal personnel conducting authorized operations who were challenged by base personnel lacking knowledge of their presence. The careful phrasing indicated that Patterson understood the political sensitivities involved in military interference with federal operations. His report focused on jurisdictional issues rather than assigning blame to specific individuals. Mitchell's expression hardened as she processed implications of Patterson's words. Military interference with federal operations carried consequences that could affect entire commands rather than just individual personnel. Federal personnel? Kim stepped forward, her intelligence background providing appropriate context for briefing senior command about classification issues. Ma'am, the individual in question has displayed federal credentials indicating authorization for activities beyond normal military jurisdiction. The diplomatic language conveyed essential information while avoiding specific details that might violate classification protocols. Mitchell would understand the implications without requiring disclosure of information that could compromise ongoing operations. Commander Walsh was studying Lexi with professional interest, his own intelligence background providing context for federal personnel operating under deep cover on military installations. Have proper verification procedures been followed through federal channels? Federal authorities will be handling verification and follow-up procedures according to established protocols, Kim replied carefully. The response indicated that military personnel had reached the limits of their authority to investigate or verify federal operations, with further action proceeding according to interagency agreements that exceeded base-level jurisdiction. Mitchell approached Lexi directly, her colonel's rank providing sufficient authority to address federal personnel conducting operations on her installation. Ma'am, I'm Colonel Mitchell, base commander. I understand there's been some confusion about your presence here. Lexi stood and faced Mitchell with respectful attention, her bearing showing the professional courtesy appropriate for interaction between federal and military authorities. Colonel Mitchell, I appreciate your concern for base security. My activities are authorized through proper federal channels and don't require local military coordination. The exchange was formal but cordial, representing proper protocol for interaction between federal and military authorities operating under different jurisdictions, but common national security objectives. Rodriguez watched with growing alarm as his morning confrontation with supposed civilian trespasser transformed into high-level discussion between federal and military authorities about classified operations he had unknowingly compromised. Mitchell was processing implications of federal operations on her base without her knowledge, balancing security concerns with recognition that such activities often proceeded according to need-to-know principles that didn't require local command notification. I understand classification requirements, Mitchell replied diplomatically. However, future coordination might help prevent misunderstandings that could compromise both federal operations and base security. The suggestion offered face-saving solution while acknowledging federal authority to conduct operations without local military oversight. Mitchell was protecting her personnel while maintaining proper respect for federal jurisdiction. Lexi nodded acknowledgement, her expression showing professional appreciation for Mitchell's balanced approach. Agreed, Colonel. Better coordination protocols would benefit all parties involved. The diplomatic exchange offered hope that consequences might be mitigated through improved procedures rather than punitive action against individual personnel who had acted within their understanding of proper security protocols. But Rodriguez's relief was premature, because federal evaluation of military personnel would proceed according to standards that extended beyond local command protection into assessment of suitability for operations requiring federal coordination. Walsh was reviewing security protocols, his commander's rank providing perspective on systemic issues that extended beyond individual mistakes. What procedures can we implement to prevent similar incidents while maintaining operational security for authorized federal activities? The question focused on constructive solutions rather than assigning blame, indicating senior command's recognition that effective security required balance between vigilance and discretion. Kim stepped forward with suggestions based on her intelligence background. Enhanced briefing protocols for security personnel about potential federal presence, without compromising specific operational details. Clear procedures for verification requests that respect classification requirements while providing necessary confirmation. The recommendations offered practical solutions that could prevent future incidents while maintaining security for both military and federal operations. Mitchell nodded approval, her command experience recognizing the value of systemic improvements over individual punishment. Implement those procedures immediately, Lieutenant Kim, and ensure all security personnel receive appropriate briefing about federal coordination protocols. The orders indicated that lessons learned from Rodriguez's mistake would be applied constructively throughout the command, potentially preventing similar incidents in the future. But Rodriguez himself remained subject to federal evaluation that would determine whether his actions demonstrated character issues incompatible with operations requiring discretion and good judgment. Garcia was beginning to understand that consequences extended far beyond immediate punishment into long-term assessment of suitability for assignments requiring interaction with federal agencies and classified operations. Colonel, Garcia said formally, what can we do to demonstrate our commitment to improve professionalism and discretion in handling sensitive situations? The question showed growth beyond defensive justification into recognition that professional development required accepting responsibility and demonstrating improvement. Mitchell studied Garcia with approval, recognizing the kind of professional adaptation that distinguished salvageable personnel from those whose careers couldn't survive their mistakes. By following the new procedures Lieutenant Kim develops, by demonstrating discretion in discussing this incident, and by proving that lessons learned translate into improved performance in future sensitive situations, Mitchell replied. The guidance offered a clear path for redemption while maintaining standards that protected national security operations from personnel who couldn't adapt to complex requirements. Rodriguez seized the opportunity gratefully, his perfect confidence replaced by genuine commitment to professional improvement. Understood, ma'am. we'll prove that this mistake was a learning opportunity rather than an indication of fundamental unfitness for service. The pledge was more realistic than his earlier desperate justifications, acknowledging responsibility while committing to demonstrated improvement rather than excuses based on circumstances beyond his control. Lexi observed the exchange with professional interest, her federal perspective providing assessment of military personnel's capacity for growth and adaptation under pressure. Whatever report she eventually filed would influence decisions about future coordination between federal and military authorities. Patterson was calculating long-term implications for his personnel, his experience providing context for how federal assessment would affect careers and assignments beyond immediate incident. "Ma'am," Patterson addressed Lexi directly, "what factors will influence federal evaluation of our personnel's suitability for future operations requiring federal coordination?" The question was professionally appropriate, while acknowledging federal authority to assess military personnel for assignments involving interagency cooperation. Lexi considered her response carefully, balancing federal assessment requirements with recognition that professional development required clear feedback about expectations and standards. Demonstrated ability to follow proper protocols under pressure, discretion in handling sensitive information, professional courtesy regardless of personal assumptions, and commitment to mission objectives over individual ego, she replied systematically. The criteria were reasonable but demanding, requiring military personnel to meet standards that extended beyond basic competence into professional excellence, suitable for operations where mistakes could have national security consequences. Rodriguez was mentally reviewing his actions against those standards, recognizing fundamental failures that extended beyond simple mistakes into character issues that would require sustained effort to address. The confrontation that had started as a righteous challenge to supposed civilian trespassers had transformed into a federal assessment of military professionalism that would influence careers and assignments for years to come. And in exactly 7 minutes, when base emergency alarms would begin wailing and federal vehicles would arrive with lights flashing, everyone in that mess hall would discover that Rodriguez's morning mistake was about to become the least of their concerns. Because the woman with blue hair had been conducting more than simple observation operations, and the classified mission they had unknowingly compromised was about to require immediate extraction under hostile conditions that would test everyone's professionalism beyond anything their training had prepared them for. The emergency klaxon that shattered the tense silence wasn't part of Rodriguez's worst nightmare. It was the sound of his nightmare becoming exponentially worse. The base-wide alert system activated with the distinctive three-tone pattern reserved for imminent security threats, followed by Commander Mitchell's voice echoing from speakers mounted throughout the facility. "Attention all personnel. Security alert level orange. Report to designated stations immediately. This is not a drill." Every person in the mess hall froze as training kicked in, their bodies automatically responding to emergency protocols drilled into muscle memory through countless repetitions. But the timing couldn't have been worse for Rodriguez, whose confrontation with federal personnel had just escalated into command-level crisis management. Lexi's reaction was immediate and telling. She pressed a finger to her ear, activating a communication device so small it had been completely invisible during the entire confrontation. Her whispered words were too quiet for anyone else to hear, but her expression shifted from professional calm to focused intensity. "Control, this is Blue 7. Confirm compromise status." The response came through her earpiece in rapid, clipped tones that suggested urgent coordination with off-site federal authorities. Whatever operation she had been conducting was clearly affected by the base emergency, but not in ways that anyone present could understand. Colonel Mitchell moved with command authority, her years of experience providing a framework for managing multiple crises simultaneously. Master Chief Patterson implements emergency security protocols. Lieutenant Kim coordinates with base intelligence to determine threat assessment. Everyone else follows standard emergency procedures. But Rodriguez found himself caught between military emergency protocols and a federal situation that had no clear resolution. His morning confrontation with a supposed civilian trespasser had become interference with classified operations during an active security emergency. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said desperately, addressing both Mitchell and Lexi simultaneously, "what do we do about this federal situation during base emergency?" Mitchell's expression showed the strain of command decisions that could affect both base security and federal operations. Federal personnel will coordinate with appropriate authorities according to established protocols. Your responsibility is following emergency procedures and maintaining operational security. The guidance was clear but unsatisfying because Rodriguez's fate remained subject to federal evaluation that would proceed according to timelines and standards beyond military control. Garcia was struggling to balance Marine emergency training with confusion about federal authority that superseded normal command structures. Colonel, do we follow federal personnel's directions or base emergency protocols? You follow proper military emergency procedures while respecting federal authority and classification requirements, Mitchell replied firmly. Professional military personnel can manage both responsibilities simultaneously. The expectation was reasonable but demanding, requiring military personnel to demonstrate competence under pressure while maintaining respect for federal operations they didn't fully understand. Brooks was calculating tactical implications of base emergency that might affect federal operations and his team's involvement in compromising classified activities. If this emergency is related to federal operations, are we going to be held responsible for compromising security through our earlier actions? The question highlighted fears that had been growing since Rodriguez's confrontation began escalating beyond simple harassment into potential federal crime. Base emergencies during federal operations could indicate compromised security, with consequences extending far beyond individual careers. Kim was coordinating with base intelligence while monitoring federal situation, her dual responsibilities creating complex protocol requirements that tested her training and experience. Federal authorities will assess any connections between base security and ongoing operations according to established procedures. The diplomatic response offered no comfort because it confirmed that federal evaluation would continue regardless of base emergency, with Rodriguez's actions subject to assessment that could determine criminal liability rather than just military discipline. Patterson was implementing emergency security protocols while maintaining awareness of federal personnel whose status complicated standard procedures. All personnel report to assigned emergency stations. Federal personnel will coordinate through appropriate channels. The orders were clear, but created obvious tension between military emergency response and federal operations that might require different protocols or priorities. Lexi finished her communication and turned to address the assembled military personnel with new urgency that suggested the base emergency was directly related to her classified activities. Colonel Mitchell, I need immediate access to base communications and secure facilities. Federal operations have been compromised, and current emergency protocols may be insufficient for addressing resulting threats. The request carried implications that sent shockwaves through everyone present. Federal operations compromised during Rodriguez's public confrontation suggested that his actions had created security breaches with consequences extending far beyond hurt feelings or career damage. Mitchell's command experience provided a framework for processing information that could affect base security and personnel safety. What kind of threats are we facing? What additional protocols do we need to implement? Classification precludes specific details, Lexi replied formally, but base personnel should be prepared for potential hostile contact, requiring elevated security measures beyond standard emergency protocols. The warning transformed base emergency from routine drill into a potential combat situation where federal operations and military security intersected in ways that could affect everyone's survival rather than just careers. Rodriguez felt his stomach drop as implications crashed over him like ice water. His morning harassment of federal personnel conducting classified operations had potentially compromised national security activities in ways that could result in hostile action against the entire base. Are you saying our confrontation with you caused this emergency? Rodriguez asked, his voice barely audible over surrounding activity. Lexi's expression remained professionally neutral, but her response carried weight that made everyone present understand the magnitude of potential consequences. Federal operations often involve time-sensitive activities where compromise can cascade into broader security threats. Public confrontations that reveal federal presence can accelerate operational timelines in ways that affect base security. The explanation was diplomatic but devastating, confirming that Rodriguez's actions had potentially triggered emergency protocols by compromising classified activities through public attention and unauthorized disclosure. Miller was processing implications that extended far beyond individual punishment into potential responsibility for base-wide security threat. Jesus Christ, we might have gotten people killed through our stupidity. Language, petty officer, Patterson snapped automatically, but his expression showed similar concern about consequences that could affect entire commands rather than individual careers. Davis emerged fully from the kitchen area, his young face showing alarm at developments that had escalated far beyond his ability to understand or influence. What can we do to help? How do we fix this mess? Lexi studied Davis with approval, recognizing the kind of professional focus that prioritized mission objectives over personal consequences. By following orders precisely, maintaining operational security absolutely, and trusting that federal personnel have training and authority to manage complex situations. The guidance was reasonable but required faith in systems and authorities that exceeded most military personnel's direct experience with federal operations. Brooks was calculating tactical scenarios that might result from compromised federal operations, his SEAL training providing context for situations where operational compromise led to hostile response. If hostile forces are responding to compromised federal operations, what kind of threats should we prepare for? The kind that require coordination between federal and military authorities, using protocols you haven't been trained in, Lexi replied pointedly. The kind where following orders without question becomes more important than understanding complete tactical picture. The response highlighted fundamental differences between military operations and federal activities that required trust in authority structures extending beyond normal military hierarchy. Garcia's Marine training was struggling with situations that exceeded her experience with clear command structures and well-defined enemy threats. How do we fight enemies we don't understand using protocols we haven't trained for? By trusting professional military leadership to coordinate with federal authorities who do understand the threats and have trained for appropriate responses, Mitchell interjected firmly. The colonel's intervention reminded everyone present that command authority existed specifically for managing situations that exceeded individual personnel's knowledge and experience. Kim was monitoring intelligence feeds while coordinating federal situation, her dual responsibilities providing insight into developments that remained classified beyond most personnel's clearance levels. Federal authorities are implementing enhanced security measures. All personnel should expect modified protocols and potential restriction of movement. The update indicated that federal response was proceeding according to predetermined plans that accounted for operational compromise and resulting security threats. Patterson was reviewing enhanced security protocols while maintaining coordination with federal personnel, whose authority complicated standard military procedures. All personnel will comply with enhanced security measures without question. Federal coordination takes priority over individual concerns or confusion. The orders were clear, but required discipline that exceeded normal military training, because federal operations often involve complexities that couldn't be explained without compromising additional classified information. Rodriguez was desperately seeking some way to contribute positively to the situation his actions had helped create. "Ma'am, Colonel, federal agent, whatever we can do to help resolve this situation, we're ready to follow orders and prove our professionalism." The pledge was sincere, but might be insufficient given the potential scope of consequences resulting from compromised federal operations during active security threats. Lexi received another communication through her earpiece, her expression shifting to reflect new developments that affected federal assessment of base security and military personnel cooperation. Control confirms enhanced threat assessment. Military personnel cooperation will be evaluated based on performance under pressure rather than initial mistakes, she announced, offering hope that demonstrated professionalism might mitigate earlier failures. The conditional assessment suggested that Rodriguez and his team might have opportunity to prove themselves through proper response to crisis situation, rather than facing predetermined punishment based on morning's confrontation. Mitchell seized the opportunity to provide clear guidance for her personnel, while maintaining proper respect for federal authority. All personnel will demonstrate the highest levels of military professionalism and cooperation with federal authorities. This is your opportunity to prove that initial mistakes don't define your character or capabilities. The leadership provided framework for redemption, while maintaining standards that protected both base security and federal operations. Brooks was calculating how SEAL training might contribute to resolving crisis situation that his team had helped create through unprofessional behavior. "Ma'am, if hostile threats require tactical response, SEAL team capabilities are available for federal coordination. The offer represented genuine attempt to contribute positively rather than continuing to complicate already difficult situation. Lexi considered the offer with professional assessment of tactical capabilities versus security risks associated with personnel who had demonstrated questionable judgment under pressure. Federal operations include provisions for military tactical support when appropriate, she replied diplomatically. Coordination will proceed according to assessment of personnel reliability and operational requirements. The conditional acceptance offered hope while maintaining professional standards that required demonstrated competence rather than assumed capability. Garcia was struggling to understand how Marine training prepared her for complex federal operations that exceeded normal military experience. Ma'am, what specific capabilities do federal operations require from military personnel? Discipline, discretion, and ability to follow complex orders without complete understanding of strategic objectives, Lexi replied systematically. Professional military personnel should possess these capabilities regardless of specific operational context. The requirements were fundamental military virtues that Rodriguez's team had failed to demonstrate during their morning confrontation, making current crisis their opportunity for redemption through proper professional behavior. Davis was observing developments with growing understanding that military service often involved situations that exceeded individual knowledge and required trust and authority structures designed to manage complex national security challenges. Ma'am, how do we know when we're performing adequately during operations we don't fully understand? Davis asked thoughtfully. Lexi's expression showed approval for question that demonstrated professional maturity beyond Davis's rank and experience. By following orders precisely, maintaining security protocols absolutely, and trusting that proper authorities have information and training necessary for mission success. The guidance emphasized fundamental military principles that applied regardless of operational complexity or individual understanding of complete strategic picture. Patterson was implementing enhanced security measures while maintaining coordination between federal and military authorities, operating under different protocols and classifications. Federal personnel, what timeline are we operating under for enhanced security implementation? Patterson asked professionally. Enhanced security is effective immediately and will continue according to threat assessment that may extend beyond current base emergency, Lexi replied formally. The response indicated that federal operations involved ongoing security concerns that could affect base operations and personnel assignments for extended periods beyond immediate crisis resolution. Miller was processing implications of extended federal presence and enhanced security measures that could affect normal base operations and personnel assignments. Will enhanced security affect normal training schedules and operational deployments? Miller asked practically. Mitchell fielded the question, her command authority providing appropriate channel for addressing personnel concerns about operational impacts. Enhanced security will be implemented in ways that minimize disruption to essential military operations while ensuring adequate protection for federal activities. The reassurance was diplomatic but realistic, acknowledging that security requirements might necessitate modifications to normal base operations. Kim was coordinating intelligence feeds with federal requirements while maintaining military communication protocols that protected operational security for both organizations. Federal authorities, what information can be shared with base personnel regarding threat assessment and appropriate response protocols? Kim asked carefully. Lexi considered classification requirements while balancing operational security with military personnel's need for sufficient information to perform their duties effectively. Base personnel should prepare for potential hostile surveillance and possible attempts to gather intelligence about federal operations through social engineering or technical means, she replied formally. The warning provided practical guidance without compromising specific operational details that could affect federal mission success. Rodriguez was beginning to understand that his morning confrontation had occurred during complex federal operations that involved ongoing security threats requiring professional military response rather than individual heroics or dramatic gestures. Ma'am, how do we identify and respond to hostile intelligence gathering attempts? Rodriguez asked professionally. The question demonstrated growth from earlier assumption-based behavior toward proper military protocol that requested specific guidance for legitimate security concerns. By reporting unusual activities or approaches through proper military channels, maintaining strict operational security in all communications, and avoiding public discussions that could provide intelligence value to hostile observers, Lexi replied approvingly. Her response rewarded Rodriguez's improved professional behavior while providing practical guidance that could contribute to operational security. Brooks was calculating how SEAL training in counter-surveillance and operational security applied to complex federal operations involving multiple agencies and classification levels. Federal operations involving multiple classification levels? How do we maintain appropriate security boundaries while ensuring effective coordination? Brooks asked thoughtfully. The question showed professional understanding of complexities involved in interagency operations that required balancing security requirements with operational effectiveness. Lexi studied Brooks with new interest, recognizing the kind of tactical thinking that could contribute positively to complex operations requiring coordination between federal and military authorities. Through strict adherence to need-to-know principles, proper channel communication, and trust in authority structures designed to manage classification boundaries effectively, she replied professionally. The guidance emphasized fundamental principles that applied regardless of operational complexity while acknowledging Brooks's growth toward professional competence. Garcia was processing lessons learned about making assumptions based on appearance rather than facts, recognizing how her Marine training should have prepared her for complex situations requiring professional judgment. "Ma'am, how do we apply lessons learned from this morning's mistakes to improve our performance in future complex operations?" Garcia asked sincerely. The question showed genuine professional development beyond defensive justification toward constructive improvement that could benefit future operations. Lexi's expression showed approval for Garcia's focus on growth and improvement rather than excuse-making or blame-shifting. By developing habits of verification before action, professional courtesy regardless of personal assumptions, and commitment to mission objectives over individual ego or comfort, she replied systematically. The guidance provided clear framework for professional development that could transform morning's mistakes into foundation for improved performance. Davis was observing how crisis situations revealed character and professional competence in ways that normal training and evaluation couldn't replicate. "Ma'am, does crisis response provide better assessment of military personnel capabilities than standard training evaluations?" Davis asked insightfully. Lexi considered the question carefully, recognizing Davis's growing understanding of how federal personnel assessed military competence for operations requiring exceptional professionalism. Crisis situations reveal whether training has developed genuine professional competence or merely technical capability without character foundation necessary for complex operations, she replied thoughtfully. The distinction was important because federal operations often required personnel who could maintain professional standards under pressure that exceeded normal military training scenarios. Patterson was reviewing how morning's crisis had tested his personnel in ways that revealed both weaknesses requiring correction and strengths that could be developed for enhanced capability. "Federal personnel, what recommendations would you make for enhancing military training to better prepare personnel for complex interagency operations?" Patterson asked professionally. The question demonstrated leadership focus on systematic improvement rather than individual blame, recognizing that morning's problems indicated training deficiencies that affected multiple personnel. Lexi appreciated Patterson's constructive approach to professional development that could benefit future operations rather than simply punishing past mistakes. Enhanced training in interagency protocols, classification awareness, and professional courtesy under pressure could significantly improve military readiness for federal coordination, she replied approvingly. The recommendations were practical and achievable, offering pathway for systematic improvement that could prevent future incidents while enhancing operational capability. The conversation was interrupted by Commander Walsh's urgent approach, his expression showing developments that required immediate command attention. "Colonel Mitchell, we have federal vehicles approaching the main gate with priority access codes. They're requesting immediate coordination with on-site federal personnel for classified extraction procedures." The announcement transformed speculative discussion of future improvements into immediate operational reality, requiring coordination between federal and military authorities under time pressure. Mitchell's command training kicked in as she processed information, indicating that federal operations were moving into active phases requiring base support and coordination. Coordinate full base cooperation with federal extraction procedures. All personnel will provide requested support without question or delay, Mitchell ordered firmly. The directive was clear and comprehensive, establishing military support for federal operations as immediate priority, superseding normal base activities. Lexi received additional communication through her earpiece, her expression showing satisfaction with developments that suggested proper coordination between federal and military authorities. Federal extraction team is en route. Base personnel cooperation will be documented as part of interagency evaluation for future operational coordination, she announced. The information provided context for morning's crisis as part of larger federal assessment process that could affect base assignments and personnel evaluations beyond individual consequences. Rodriguez was beginning to understand that his confrontation with federal personnel had occurred during complex operations that involved ongoing assessment of military readiness for interagency cooperation. Ma'am, will base personnel performance during federal extraction procedures affect our individual evaluations and career prospects? Rodriguez asked practically. The question showed growth from earlier focus on avoiding punishment toward understanding how professional performance could influence future opportunities. Lexi studied Rodriguez with assessment that balanced his morning's mistakes against his potential for professional development and improved performance. Federal evaluation considers complete performance record, including response to correction and demonstrated growth under pressure, she replied diplomatically. The response offered hope for redemption through proper professional behavior while maintaining standards that require genuine improvement rather than superficial compliance. Miller was calculating how SEAL tactical capabilities might contribute to federal extraction procedures that could demonstrate professional competence and cooperation. Ma'am, if federal extraction requires tactical security, SEAL team capabilities are available for coordination and support, Miller offered professionally. The proposal represented attempt to contribute positively to operations rather than continuing to complicate federal activities through unprofessional behavior. Lexi considered Miller's offer with professional assessment of tactical requirements versus personnel reliability issues that had been demonstrated during morning's confrontation. Tactical support requirements will be assessed based on operational needs and personnel reliability evaluations, she replied formally. The conditional response maintained professional standards while offering opportunity for Miller to demonstrate improved competence through proper behavior. Brooks was observing how federal operations integrated military capabilities through proper coordination rather than assumption-based relationships that had characterized morning's confrontation. Federal operations requiring military tactical support. What protocols ensure effective coordination while maintaining operational security? Brooks asked professionally. The question showed understanding of complexities involved in interagency operations that required balancing effectiveness with security requirements. Lexi appreciated Brooks's professional approach to understanding operational requirements rather than assuming automatic inclusion based on tactical capabilities. Through established command relationships, clear authority structures, and personnel who demonstrate reliability under pressure, she replied approvingly. The guidance emphasized professional relationship building rather than entitled assumption of cooperation based on rank or technical capability. Garcia was learning how professional military service extended beyond individual unit loyalty into broader national security responsibilities, requiring cooperation with multiple agencies and authority structures. Ma'am, how do we balance unit loyalty with interagency cooperation requirements that might involve complex or conflicting priorities? Garcia asked thoughtfully. The question demonstrated growing understanding of professional military service that extended beyond simple unit cohesion into broader national security framework. Lexi studied Garcia with approval for question that showed professional maturity beyond her earlier defensive behavior. Professional military personnel understand that unit effectiveness depends on integration within larger national security structure that includes multiple agencies and authorities, she replied systematically. The guidance emphasized broader perspective that could transform Garcia's unit-focused loyalty into more sophisticated understanding of professional military service. Davis was observing how crisis situations required professional growth beyond comfort zones, forcing personnel to develop capabilities that exceeded their initial training and experience. Ma'am, Does effective military service require continuous professional development that extends beyond initial training into new areas of expertise? Davis asked insightfully. Lexi's expression showed genuine respect for Davis's question, which demonstrated understanding of professional military career development that exceeded his current rank and experience. Excellence in military service requires adaptability, continuous learning, and willingness to grow beyond comfortable assumptions into broader professional competence, she replied approvingly. The response validated Davis's instincts about professional development while providing guidance that could benefit his entire career trajectory. The arrival of federal vehicles outside the mess hall created visible activity that everyone could observe through windows facing the main courtyard. Black SUVs with government license plates and discreet emergency lighting provided evidence that federal operations were proceeding according to predetermined protocols. Patterson was implementing coordination procedures with arriving federal personnel while maintaining military discipline and operational security throughout base operations. All personnel will maintain current positions while federal coordination procedures are implemented. No unauthorized movement or communication regarding federal activities, Patterson ordered clearly. The directive established clear expectations while protecting both military and federal operational security during complex coordination procedures. Rodriguez was struggling with mixture of relief that federal personnel were handling the situation professionally and anxiety about potential consequences for his morning's unprofessional behavior. Master Chief, what can we do to demonstrate proper cooperation and professionalism during federal coordination procedures? Rodriguez asked humbly. The question showed genuine commitment to improve behavior rather than continued focus on avoiding consequences through excuse-making or blame-shifting. Patterson studied Rodriguez with assessment that balanced Morning's failures against his potential for professional redemption through proper behavior under pressure. By following orders precisely, maintaining strict operational security, and demonstrating the military professionalism you should have shown from the beginning, Patterson replied firmly. The guidance was direct, but offered clear pathway for redemption through proper professional behavior during ongoing operations. Miller was observing how federal coordination proceeded according to established protocols that demonstrated preparation and professional competence that exceeded normal military operational planning. Master Chief, federal coordination protocols, are these standard procedures that we should be familiar with for future operations? Miller asked professionally. The question showed recognition that Morning's ignorance about federal coordination might indicate training deficiencies that could be corrected through proper education and preparation. Patterson appreciated Miller's focus on professional development rather than continued confusion about federal authority and operational requirements. Enhanced training and interagency coordination will be implemented to ensure all personnel understand proper protocols for complex operations involving multiple agencies, Patterson replied approvingly. The commitment to systematic improvement offered hope that Morning's problems could be transformed into foundation for enhanced professional capability. Brooks was calculating how SEAL training principles applied to complex federal operations that required professional competence beyond normal military tactical capability. Master Chief, complex interagency operations, do these require additional training beyond normal SEAL capabilities? Brooks asked thoughtfully. The question demonstrated understanding that federal coordination might require professional development beyond standard military training programs. Patterson studied Brooks with approval for recognition that professional military service often involved requirements that exceeded initial training and required continuous development. Professional military career development includes preparation for complex operations that may exceed initial training. Enhanced education and experience broaden operational capability, Patterson replied professionally. The guidance emphasized career-long learning that could transform Morning's failures into opportunity for enhanced professional competence. Garcia was processing how Marine training emphasized unit cohesion and aggressive action, but federal coordination required more sophisticated professional judgment and discretionary decision-making. Master Chief, how do we balance aggressive military training with discretionary judgment required for complex federal coordination? Garcia asked sincerely. The question showed recognition that her Morning's aggressive behavior might indicate training emphasis that required modification for effective interagency cooperation. Patterson appreciated Garcia's willingness to examine her own professional development, rather than defending behavior that had proven inadequate for complex operational requirements. Professional military competence includes knowing when aggression serves mission objectives and when discretion and patience achieve better results, Patterson replied thoughtfully. The distinction was important for Garcia's professional development and could transform her aggressive tendencies into more sophisticated operational capability. Davis was observing how federal personnel maintained professional calm under pressure while managing complex coordination requirements that exceeded normal military operational scope. Master Chief, federal operational calm under pressure, is this skill that can be developed through military training? Davis asked curiously. The question demonstrated Davis's recognition that federal personnel possessed professional capabilities that exceeded normal military training outcomes. Patterson studied Davis with approval for his focus on professional development rather than defensive comparison between military and federal capabilities. Professional competence under pressure develops through experience with complex operations, proper training, and character development that emphasizes mission success over personal comfort, Patterson replied approvingly. The guidance provided framework for professional development that could benefit Davis throughout his military career. Lexi finished coordinating with arriving federal personnel and turned to address the assembled military personnel with assessment of their cooperation during crisis management. Base personnel cooperation during federal coordination has been noted and will be included in interagency evaluation reports, she announced formally. The statement provided closure for morning's crisis while indicating that federal assessment would continue based on demonstrated professional behavior rather than initial mistakes. Colonel Mitchell stepped forward to provide command guidance for her personnel regarding ongoing federal coordination and future operational requirements. All personnel have demonstrated the ability to learn from mistakes and improve professional performance under pressure. Enhanced training and interagency coordination will prepare everyone for future complex operations, Mitchell announced firmly. The leadership statement provided positive framework while acknowledging that systematic improvements were needed to prevent future incidents and enhance operational capability. Rodriguez felt genuine relief mixed with determination to prove that morning's mistakes represented learning opportunity rather than fundamental character failures that would limit his career potential. Colonel, thank you for the opportunity to demonstrate improved professionalism. We won't disappoint the trust you've placed in us, Rodriguez said sincerely. The commitment was more realistic than his earlier desperate pleading, showing genuine understanding of professional responsibility rather than focused solely on avoiding consequences. Mitchell studied Rodriguez with assessment that balanced his potential for professional growth against the need to maintain standards that protected operational effectiveness and federal coordination. Professional military service requires continuous growth and adaptation. Today's lessons will benefit your entire career if properly applied to future challenges, Mitchell replied encouragingly. The guidance provided positive framework while maintaining expectations that required genuine improvement rather than superficial compliance with minimum standards. Miller was calculating how morning's lessons about assumptions, professional courtesy, and proper protocols could be applied to enhance SEAL team effectiveness in future complex operations. Colonel, enhanced training and interagency coordination, will this improve our effectiveness in joint operations that require federal cooperation? Miller asked professionally. The question showed recognition that morning's failures indicated systematic training deficiencies that could be corrected through proper education and preparation. Mitchell appreciated Miller's focus on operational improvement rather than individual concerns about career consequences or punishment. Enhanced professional capability benefits all operations requiring coordination between multiple agencies and authority structures. Today's lessons will strengthen future mission effectiveness, Mitchell replied approvingly. The response emphasized mission-focused benefits that could motivate genuine professional development rather than compliance motivated solely by fear of consequences. Brooks was processing how federal coordination required trust and authority structures that extended beyond normal military hierarchy into complex interagency relationships requiring sophisticated professional judgment. Colonel, complex authority structures and federal coordination, how do we develop judgment necessary for effective cooperation without complete operational understanding? Brooks asked thoughtfully. The question demonstrated recognition that effective interagency cooperation required professional development beyond normal military training in clear command relationships. Mitchell studied Brooks with approval for his focus on developing professional competence that could benefit future operations, rather than questioning federal authority based on incomplete understanding. Professional military judgment develops through experience with complex operations, proper training, and characters that prioritizes mission success over individual comfort with ambiguity, Mitchell replied systematically. The guidance provided framework for professional development that could transform Brooks's tactical capabilities into broader operational competence. Garcia was recognizing how her marine aggressiveness needed to be balanced with sophisticated professional judgment that considered broader operational context rather than immediate unit-level concerns. Colonel, how do we maintain unit effectiveness while developing broader professional perspective required for complex interagency operations? Garcia asked sincerely. The question showed understanding that professional military development required growth beyond initial training emphasis while maintaining core military virtues and capabilities. Mitchell appreciated Garcia's willingness to examine her own professional development needs rather than defending behavior that had proven inadequate for complex operational requirements. Unit effectiveness depends on individual professional competence that includes broader perspective and sophisticated judgment. Enhanced capability strengthens rather than weakens unit performance, Mitchell replied encouragingly. The reassurance addressed Garcia's concerns about unit loyalty while providing guidance for professional development that could benefit her entire career. Davis was observing how crisis situations revealed character and professional potential in ways that normal training couldn't replicate, providing opportunities for growth that exceeded normal developmental timelines. Colonel, crisis-based professional development, does this accelerate capability building in ways that normal training can't achieve? Davis asked insightfully. The question demonstrated Davis's growing understanding of how challenging situations could catalyze professional growth beyond normal career development timelines. Mitchell studied Davis with genuine respect for his mature perspective on professional development that exceeded his current rank and experience level. Challenging situations reveal character and accelerate professional development for personnel who embrace learning opportunities rather than defending comfortable assumptions, Mitchell replied approvingly. The guidance validated Davis's instincts while providing framework for continued professional growth throughout his military career. The federal extraction procedures concluded with Lexi and arriving federal personnel coordinating final details while maintaining operational security that protected classified aspects of their activities. Base coordination has been exemplary, Lexi announced to the assembled military personnel. Professional growth demonstrated during crisis management indicates positive potential for future interagency cooperation. The assessment provided positive closure while acknowledging that morning's problems had been transformed into foundation for enhanced professional capability. Patterson stepped forward to provide final guidance for his personnel regarding lessons learned and expectations for continued professional development. Today's experiences will be integrated into enhanced training programs that prepare all personnel for complex operations, requiring interagency coordination and sophisticated professional judgment, Patterson announced formally. The commitment to systematic improvement offered hope that morning's crisis would benefit future operations, rather than simply serving as cautionary tale about professional failures. Rodriguez approached Lexi with genuine humility that replaced his earlier arrogance and defensive behavior. Ma'am, thank you for the opportunity to learn from our mistakes. We'll prove that today's lessons translate into improved professionalism and operational effectiveness, Rodriguez said sincerely. The commitment was realistic and focused on professional development rather than avoiding consequences through excuse-making or blame-shifting. Lexi studied Rodriguez with assessment that considered his potential for genuine professional growth against the need to maintain standards that protected future operations. Professional competence develops through experience with challenging situations and willingness to grow beyond comfortable assumptions. Today's lessons provide foundation for enhanced capability, she replied approvingly. The response offered encouragement while maintaining professional standards that require genuine improvement rather than superficial compliance. Miller stepped forward to express similar commitment to professional development and improve performance in future complex operations. Ma'am, enhanced training and interagency coordination "We're committed to developing professional competence that contributes positively to federal operations, rather than complicating them through ignorance or unprofessional behavior," Miller said professionally. The statement showed understanding of broader professional responsibilities that extended beyond unit-level concerns into national security framework requiring sophisticated judgment. Lexi appreciated Miller's focus on contributing positively to operations rather than simply avoiding mistakes through defensive behavior or minimal compliance. Professional military personnel who understand broader operational context become valuable assets for complex missions requiring multiple agency coordination, she replied encouragingly. The guidance provided positive framework while emphasizing professional development that could benefit Miller's entire career trajectory. Brooks approached with recognition that his tactical capabilities needed to be enhanced with broader professional competence that included interagency coordination and sophisticated operational judgment. MAM, SEAL tactical training combined with enhanced interagency coordination education. Would this create capability that benefits both military and federal operations? Brooks asked thoughtfully. The question demonstrated understanding that professional development could enhance, rather than compromise, his existing military capabilities. Lexi studied Brooks with approval for his recognition that professional growth involved building upon existing strengths rather than abandoning military identity for federal compliance. Enhanced professional capability that combines tactical competence with broader operational understanding creates personnel valuable for the most challenging and important missions, she replied approvingly. The response validated Brooks's instincts while providing motivation for continued professional development that could enhance his career potential. Garcia approached with genuine recognition that her aggressive Marine training needed to be balanced with sophisticated professional judgment appropriate for complex operational environments. "Ma'am, maintaining Marine effectiveness while developing discretionary judgment, how do we balance aggressive training with professional sophistication required for federal coordination?" Garcia asked sincerely. The question showed understanding that professional development required integration rather than abandonment of core military virtues and capabilities. Lexi appreciated Garcia's willingness to examine her professional development needs rather than defending behavior that had proven inadequate for complex situations. Professional competence includes knowing when aggression serves operational objectives and when patience and discretion achieve better results. "Sophisticated judgment enhances rather than weakens military effectiveness," she replied systematically. The guidance provided framework for professional development that could transform Garcia's aggressive tendencies into more sophisticated operational capability. Davis approached with mature perspective that demonstrated understanding of professional development, opportunities that exceeded his current rank and experience level. "Ma'am, continuous professional development beyond initial training. Is this characteristic that distinguishes exceptional military personnel from those who meet only minimum standards?" Davis asked insightfully. The question showed recognition that professional excellence required commitment to growth and learning that extended throughout military careers. Lexi studied Davis with genuine respect for his mature perspective on professional development and career-long learning. Excellence in military service requires intellectual curiosity, willingness to grow beyond comfortable assumptions, and commitment to mission success that exceeds personal convenience or comfort, she replied approvingly. The response validated Davis's instincts while providing guidance that could benefit his entire career trajectory and professional development. The federal coordination procedures concluded with proper protocols that maintained operational security while acknowledging military cooperation that had transformed Morning's crisis into successful interagency collaboration. Colonel Mitchell provided final command guidance for her personnel regarding lessons learned and expectations for continued professional excellence. Today's experiences demonstrate that challenging situations reveal character and accelerate professional development for personnel committed to excellence. Enhanced training and continued growth will prepare everyone for future complex operations, Mitchell announced firmly. The leadership statement provided positive framework while maintaining expectations that required genuine professional development rather than minimum compliance with standards. Patterson stepped forward to implement systematic improvements that would transform Morning's lessons into enhanced operational capability for all base personnel. Enhanced training programs will be developed immediately to prepare all personnel for complex interagency operations requiring sophisticated professional judgment and cooperation, Patterson announced formally. The commitment to systematic improvement offered hope that morning's crisis would benefit future operations and professional development for all personnel. As federal personnel prepared for departure, Lexi turned to provide final assessment and guidance for the military personnel who had demonstrated significant professional growth during crisis management. I hope that revelation hit you as hard as it hit everyone in that mess hall. If this story proved that we should never judge someone by their appearance, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more incredible tales of hidden warriors. Ring that notification bell so you never miss these amazing stories of people who are so much more than they seem. Base personnel have demonstrated the professional adaptability and commitment to excellence that characterizes the finest military service. Today's lessons provide foundation for enhanced capability that will benefit future operations and career development, Lexi announced formally. The positive assessment provided closure while acknowledging that morning's problems had been successfully transformed into professional development opportunities. Rodriguez stepped forward to express final commitment to applying lessons learned toward improved professional performance and operational effectiveness. Ma'am, Colonel, Master Chief, thank you for the opportunity to learn and grow from our mistakes. We're committed to proving that today's lessons translate into enhanced professionalism and operational capability, Rodriguez said sincerely. The commitment was realistic and focused on professional development rather than defensive justification or blame shifting. Mitchell nodded approvingly, her command experience recognizing genuine professional growth that could benefit future operations and personnel development. Professional military service requires continuous learning and adaptation. Today's experiences provide foundation for enhanced capability that will strengthen all future operations, Mitchell replied encouragingly. The guidance emphasized positive outcomes while maintaining expectations that required genuine improvement rather than superficial compliance. As federal vehicles prepared to depart, Lexi received final communication through her earpiece that provided context for successful completion of complex operations, despite morning's complications. Federal operations have been successfully completed with excellent military cooperation. Interagency coordination evaluation will reflect positive professional development and operational capability, she announced to the assembled personnel. The statement provided closure for morning's crisis, while indicating that federal assessment had recognized genuine professional growth rather than simply noting initial failures. The departure of federal personnel marked successful conclusion of complex crisis management that had tested everyone's professional competence and character under pressure that exceeded normal training scenarios. Patterson implemented systematic improvements that would integrate morning's lessons into enhanced training programs benefiting all base personnel. Enhanced interagency coordination training will be mandatory for all personnel, emphasizing professional judgment, operational security, and sophisticated cooperation requirements, Patterson announced formally. The systematic approach offered hope that future operations would benefit from lessons learned, rather than simply avoiding repetition of morning's mistakes. Rodriguez, Miller, Brooks, and Garcia approached their leadership with genuine commitment to applying enhanced training toward improved professional competence and operational effectiveness. Thank you for the opportunity to demonstrate that mistakes can become foundation for professional growth rather than career-ending failures, Rodriguez said humbly. The recognition showed genuine professional maturity that could benefit future operations and career development. Mitchell studied her personnel with approval for their demonstrated ability to learn from challenging experiences and transform failures into foundation for enhanced capability. Professional military excellence requires continuous growth, adaptability under pressure, and commitment to mission success that exceeds personal comfort. Today's experiences demonstrate these qualities and provide foundation for enhanced operational capability, Mitchell replied approvingly. The positive assessment acknowledged professional growth while maintaining expectations that required continued development rather than complacency about improved performance. Davis approached with mature perspective that demonstrated understanding of professional development, opportunities that exceeded his current experience level. Colonel, today's lessons about professional judgment, interagency cooperation, and sophisticated operational requirements Will these benefit our effectiveness in all future complex operations? Davis asked thoughtfully. The question showed recognition that morning's lessons had broader application beyond specific federal coordination scenarios. Mitchell studied Davis with genuine respect for his mature perspective on professional development and operational effectiveness. Enhanced professional competence benefits all military operations, from basic unit activities to complex interagency missions. Today's lessons provide foundation for career-long excellence and operational effectiveness, Mitchell replied encouragingly. The guidance validated Davis's instincts while providing framework for continued professional development throughout his military career. The successful resolution of morning's crisis demonstrated how challenging situations could accelerate professional development and transform initial failures into foundation for enhanced capability and operational effectiveness. Patterson coordinated final implementation of enhanced training programs while maintaining operational security that protected both military and federal interests. All personnel will participate in enhanced professional development programs that prepare everyone for complex operational requirements and sophisticated judgment challenges, Patterson announced formally. The comprehensive approach ensured that morning's lessons would benefit all base personnel rather than only those directly involved in crisis management. As normal base operations resumed with enhanced protocols and improved professional standards, everyone involved recognized that morning's confrontation had become catalyst for professional development that exceeded normal training outcomes. Rodriguez reflected on transformation from arrogant assumptions about civilian trespasser to humble recognition of professional development needs that required continuous learning and growth. Today taught me that professional military service requires intellectual humility, sophisticated judgment, and respect for authority structures that exceed my direct experience, Rodriguez said thoughtfully. The recognition demonstrated genuine professional growth that could benefit his entire career trajectory and operational effectiveness. Miller processed lessons about assumptions, professional courtesy, and proper protocols that could enhance SEAL team effectiveness in all future operations. Enhanced interagency coordination capability will strengthen our tactical effectiveness by improving our ability to operate within complex authority structures and operational requirements, Miller observed professionally. The insight showed recognition that professional development enhanced rather than compromised existing military capabilities. Brooks calculated how sophisticated professional judgment could enhance tactical capabilities through better integration with broader operational context and strategic objectives. Professional competence that combines tactical skill with broader operational understanding creates capability for the most challenging and important missions, Brooks reflected approvingly. The understanding demonstrated professional maturity that could benefit his entire career development and operational effectiveness. Garcia recognized how aggressive Marine training needed to be balanced with sophisticated professional judgment, appropriate for complex operational environments requiring discretion and patience. Maintaining unit effectiveness while developing broader professional perspective strengthens rather than weakens military capability, Garcia observed sincerely. The recognition showed professional growth that could transform her aggressive tendencies into more sophisticated operational competence. Davis processed lessons about continuous professional development, intellectual curiosity, and commitment to excellence that exceeded minimum standards or comfortable assumptions. Professional military excellence requires willingness to grow beyond initial training into broader competence that serves complex operational requirements, Davis reflected maturely. The understanding demonstrated perspective that exceeded his current rank and experience level, suggesting significant potential for future professional development. As enhanced training programs were implemented and normal base operations resumed with improved protocols, everyone involved recognized that morning's crisis had become catalyst for professional development and operational capability enhancement. The systematic improvements ensured that lessons learned would benefit future operations while maintaining military effectiveness and federal coordination capability that exceeded pre-crisis standards. Colonel Mitchell provided final assessment of professional development and enhanced capability that had resulted from successful crisis management and commitment to continuous improvement. Today's experiences demonstrate that challenging situations reveal character and accelerate professional development for personnel committed to excellence rather than comfortable assumptions, Mitchell announced formally. The positive framework acknowledged genuine professional growth while maintaining expectations that required continued development and commitment to operational excellence. 3 months later, the consequences of that morning's confrontation had rippled through every level of military and federal coordination. Rodriguez found himself selected for advanced interagency coordination training. His transformation from arrogant assumptions to humble professional development had caught commanders' attention, who valued adaptability and growth potential. Miller, Brooks, and Garcia had similarly benefited from enhanced training opportunities that combined existing tactical capabilities with broader operational competence. Davis's mature perspective had resulted in accelerated promotion and assignment to advanced education programs, preparing him for leadership positions. Master Chief Patterson's crisis leadership resulted in assignment to develop enhanced interagency coordination training programs throughout the military, transforming local lessons into systematic improvements. The base had become a model for interagency coordination and professional development programs that transformed challenging situations into enhanced capability opportunities. But the most significant consequences were still unfolding in ways none of them could have anticipated. Because Lexi's federal operations had been far more complex than anyone understood, with implications extending into international security concerns and classified missions affecting global stability. The woman with blue hair had been conducting counterintelligence operations that identified security vulnerabilities in military bases worldwide, and Rodriguez's confrontation had inadvertently revealed hostile intelligence networks operating undetected for months. The compromise of federal operations had actually been calculated exposure designed to trigger responses from hostile intelligence services, allowing federal authorities to identify and neutralize threats that could have affected national security operations on a massive scale. Rodriguez's morning mistake had unknowingly contributed to one of the most successful counterintelligence operations in recent history, transforming his career-threatening failure into inadvertent service to national security. The enhanced training programs implemented throughout the military were actually systematic improvements designed to prepare personnel for future operations, requiring unprecedented levels of interagency coordination and professional competence. As normal base operations continued with enhanced protocols, everyone recognized that seemingly routine situations could have implications extending far beyond immediate appearances. In secure facilities where classification levels protected operational details, Lexi's final report documented successful completion of complex counterintelligence operations with excellent military cooperation that exceeded all expectations. But Lexi had disappeared into the shadowy world of classified operations, where her real identity remained protected by classification levels that ensured her contributions to national security would never be fully known. The blue-haired woman who had sat quietly eating oatmeal had been one of the most highly trained federal operatives in service, conducting operations that protected military personnel from threats they would never know existed. The lessons learned from Rodriguez's confrontation had become foundation for enhanced professional development that would serve military personnel throughout their careers. The story would never be told publicly, but its lessons would continue benefiting military and federal operations for generations. 6 months later, as Rodriguez settled into his new assignment, conducting complex interagency operations, his secure phone buzzed with encrypted message that would change everything. Ghost 7 requesting immediate consultation. Moscow asset compromised. Target knows about blue hair contact. How is that possible? The message suggested morning's confrontation had been part of larger intelligence operation, with consequences still unfolding in ways that could affect global security. Rodriguez stared at the communication, realizing his encounter with the blue-haired federal operative had been beginning rather than conclusion of complex intelligence operations extending far beyond anything he could have imagined. Someone with access to highly classified information was providing intelligence to hostile services, compromising operations that protected military personnel from threats exceeding public understanding. Rodriguez's phone buzzed again with coordinates for immediate departure to classified location where federal and military authorities were coordinating response to intelligence compromise with global implications. Departure in 30 minutes. Bring everything learned about professional competence under pressure. Lives depend on applying lessons from morning confrontation. The message confirmed that Morning's crisis had been preparation for complex operations, requiring every aspect of professional development gained through systematic improvement. As Rodriguez gathered equipment and prepared for deployment to classified operations that could affect global security, he reflected on transformation from Morning's arrogant assumptions to sophisticated understanding of professional military service. The blue-haired woman he had harassed for 25 minutes had become catalyst for professional development that prepared him for the most challenging missions in service to national security. The morning that began with Rodriguez's arrogant assumptions had become foundation for operational excellence that would be tested in classified missions, where professional competence could determine success or failure of operations affecting global stability. And somewhere in secure facilities protected by classification levels, Lexi prepared for extraction from compromised position, while coordinating federal response to intelligence threats that could affect military and civilian personnel worldwide. The patient federal operative who had endured military harassment while conducting classified counterintelligence operations was about to discover whether lessons learned had prepared military personnel for complex operations requiring unprecedented professional competence and interagency coordination under pressure that could affect global security for generations to come.